I'll never forget the day my grandson started attending Mrs. Johnson's class. He was so excited, and I was proud to see him growing up. Mrs. Johnson seemed like a great teacher, always smiling and enthusiastic. My grandson would come home every day, talking about all the fun things they did in class. As the months went by, I started to notice some discrepancies in my bank account. At first, I thought it was just a minor error, but then I saw a pattern. I would check my account online, and there would be a missing transaction here and there. I brushed it off as a minor issue, but deep down, I knew something was off. It wasn't until I received a call from the bank that I realized the true extent of the problem. "You're saying $20,000 is just gone?" I asked. The voice on the other end was hesitant. "I'm afraid so, sir." I couldn't believe it. I had trusted Mrs. Johnson with my grandson's education, and this is how she repaid me. I felt betrayed, angry, and hurt. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to take action. I decided to take matters into my own hands and investigate further. I started by talking to other parents and gathering evidence. I asked them if they had noticed anything strange, but no one seemed to know anything. As I dug deeper, I discovered that Mrs. Johnson had been using the money to fund her own lavish lifestyle. I was furious. I couldn't believe that someone who was supposed to be educating my grandson was instead using my money to buy luxury cars and expensive jewelry. I knew I had to take action, but I wasn't sure what to do next. I felt like I was in a state of limbo, unsure of how to proceed. That's when I decided to seek help from a trusted friend, someone who had experience with these types of situations. Together, we came up with a plan to expose Mrs. Johnson and bring her to justice. I was determined to see this through to the end. But little did I know, things were about to take a dramatic turn. The truth was more complicated than I had ever imagined. And that's when I realized that sometimes, the truth is not always black and white. Sometimes, it's a complex web of gray areas. I was about to learn that Mrs. Johnson's story was not as simple as I thought, and that the truth would challenge everything I thought I knew. As I delved deeper into the case, I began to notice that Mrs. Johnson's behavior had been suspicious for months. She would often ask parents for donations, claiming that the school was in dire need of funds. But when I asked the school administration about it, they seemed evasive and secretive. I started to wonder if there was more to the story than just a simple case of embezzlement. Was Mrs. Johnson working alone, or was there a larger conspiracy at play? I decided to pay a visit to the school, hoping to get some answers. As I walked into the school office, I was greeted by the principal, Mrs. Smith. She seemed nervous and fidgety, avoiding eye contact. "Can I help you with something?" she asked. "I'm here to talk about Mrs. Johnson," I replied, my voice firm. "I've been investigating some discrepancies in my bank account, and I believe she's involved." Mrs. Smith's expression changed from nervous to worried. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to sound convincing. But I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes. "Don't play dumb, Mrs. Smith," I said, my voice rising. "I have evidence. I know that Mrs. Johnson has been embezzling money from parents, including me. And I think you know more about it than you're letting on." Mrs. Smith sighed, looking around the office nervously. "Okay, fine," she said. "I'll tell you what I know. But please, you have to understand, this is all very complicated." I leaned forward, my heart racing with anticipation. "What do you mean?" I asked. Mrs. Smith took a deep breath before speaking. "Mrs. Johnson has been in financial trouble for a while. She's been struggling to make ends meet, and she saw an opportunity to make some extra money by embezzling from parents. But it wasn't just her idea. There are others involved, people who have been using the school as a front for their own nefarious activities. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of activities? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Smith hesitated before answering. I'm not entirely sure. But I do know that it involves some shady dealings, possibly even money laundering. And I think it goes all the way to the top. I was stunned. I had suspected that there was more to the story, but I had no idea it was this big. Who's involved? I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. Mrs. Smith looked around the office nervously before speaking. I don't know if I should say. But I will tell you this, it's someone who has a lot of power and influence in this town. Someone who will stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. I felt a surge of determination. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. I'll find out who it is, I said, my voice firm. And I'll make sure they pay for what they've done. Mrs. Smith nodded, a look of relief on her face. I'm glad someone is finally willing to listen, she said. But be careful. These people are not to be trifled with. They will do whatever it takes to keep their secrets safe. I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. I was in this now, and I was going to see it through to the end. But as I left the school, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head. I was taking on powerful people, people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. And I was just one man, determined to bring them down. As I walked back to my car, I noticed a figure watching me from across the street. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with a look of intense scrutiny on her face. I felt a shiver run down my spine as our eyes met. Who was she, and what did she want? I quickly got into my car and drove away, my heart racing with anticipation. I knew that I had just scratched the surface of something big, something that could put me and my family in danger. But I was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking in my rearview mirror, expecting to see the woman's face staring back at me. But she was nowhere to be seen. I arrived home, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to watch my back. But I was determined to bring down the people who had betrayed me and my family. I sat down at my desk, my eyes scanning the room for any signs of surveillance. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to cover my tracks. But I was determined to see this through, no matter what it took. As I began to work, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the woman's face staring back at me. But she was nowhere to be seen. I worked for hours, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to watch my back. But I was determined to bring down the people who had betrayed me and my family. As the sun began to set, I realized that I had to take a break. I was tired and hungry, and I needed to clear my head. I decided to take a walk, hoping to clear my mind and come up with a plan. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the woman's face staring back at me. But she was nowhere to be seen. I walked for hours, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to watch my back. But I was determined to bring down the people who had betrayed me and my family. As the sun began to set, I realized that I had to get back to work. I had a plan to come up with, and I needed to get started. I walked back to my house, my mind racing with possibilities. As I sat down at my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the woman's face staring back at me. But she was nowhere to be seen. I worked for hours, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to watch my back. But I was determined to bring down the people who had betrayed me and my family. As the night wore on, I began to feel a sense of unease. I knew that I was taking a risk, that I was putting myself and my family in danger. But I was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. As I worked, I heard a noise outside. It was a faint scratching sound, like someone was trying to get my attention. I froze, my heart racing with anticipation. Who was it, and what did they want? I slowly got up from my chair and walked to the window. I peeked outside, but I couldn't see anyone. The scratching sound stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the neighborhood. I stood there for a few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting to see if the noise would start again. But there was nothing. I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. I told myself it was just a stray animal or a neighbor's kid playing a prank. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I knew that I was being watched, and I knew that I was in danger. I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept wandering back to the scratching sound and the feeling of being watched. I knew that I had to do something to protect myself and my family. I decided to install some security cameras around the house and to vary my daily routine. I didn't want to make it easy for whoever was watching me to track my movements. As the days went by, the scratching sound became a regular occurrence. It would happen at all hours of the day and night, and it would always stop when I went to investigate. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I decided to talk to a private investigator, hoping that he could help me figure out who was behind the strange occurrences. His name was Jack, and he was a former cop with a no-nonsense attitude. I told him everything, from the embezzlement to the scratching sound. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious by the minute. "I think you're in over your head," he said when I finished. "This isn't just about some small-time crook trying to scare you. This is about someone who is willing to do whatever it takes to keep you quiet." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What can I do?" I asked. "We need to get to the bottom of this," Jack said. "I'll start by investigating Mrs. Johnson and the school. But in the meantime, I want you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone, and don't talk to anyone about this. Can you do that?" I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Finally, someone was taking me seriously. Jack left, and I was alone once again. But this time, I didn't feel so scared. I knew that I had someone on my side, someone who was willing to help me fight back. As the days went by, Jack kept me updated on his progress. He had discovered some discrepancies in the school's financial records, and he was starting to suspect that Mrs. Johnson was just a small part of a much larger scheme. But he still didn't know who was behind it all. I was starting to get frustrated. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. But Jack kept telling me to be patient, that we were getting close. And then, one night, I received a call from an unknown number. "You're getting close," a voice said. "But you're not going to like what you find." The line went dead, and I was left staring at my phone in shock. Who was that? And what did they mean? I tried to call Jack, but he didn't answer. I was starting to feel scared again, scared that I was in over my head. I decided to go to the school, to try and confront Mrs. Johnson once and for all. But as I arrived, I saw that the school was surrounded by police cars. Something was happening, and I didn't know what. I got out of my car and walked towards the school, my heart pounding in my chest. What was going on? And what did it have to do with me? As I walked towards the school, I saw a group of police officers standing outside, talking to each other in hushed tones. I approached them, trying to act calm, and asked what was going on. One of the officers turned to me and said, "We're investigating a possible crime scene. Can I ask what you're doing here?" I explained that I was a parent and that I had been investigating some irregularities at the school. The officer's expression changed, and he asked me to follow him. I was led to a room inside the school, where I saw Jack, the private investigator, sitting at a table, surrounded by police officers. He looked up at me and nodded, and I could see the tension in his eyes. The officer who had brought me in explained that they had received a tip about a possible crime at the school, and that they were investigating. He asked me if I knew anything about it, and I told him about the embezzlement and the strange occurrences that had been happening. The officers looked at each other, and one of them asked me to sit down. They began to question me, asking me about my investigation and what I had found out. I told them everything, from the discrepancies in the financial records to the scratching sound at my house. As I spoke, I could see the tension in the room building. The officers were exchanging glances, and I could tell that they were trying to piece together a larger picture. After I finished speaking, the officers began to discuss the case among themselves. I sat there, listening, as they talked about possible suspects and motives. Jack caught my eye and nodded, and I could see that he was trying to tell me something. But what? The officers continued to discuss the case, and I could see that they were getting closer to the truth. But just as it seemed like they were about to make a breakthrough, one of the officers received a call. He listened for a moment, and then his expression changed. "We have to go," he said, standing up. "What's happening?" I asked, feeling a sense of unease. "We have a situation at the principal's office," the officer replied. "It seems like someone has been trying to destroy evidence." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was trying to destroy evidence? And what did they have to hide? The officers rushed out of the room, leaving me alone with Jack. "What's going on?" I asked him. "I don't know," he replied. "But I think we're getting close to the truth. And I think someone is trying to stop us." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. We were going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Jack and I followed the officers to the principal's office, where we found a scene of chaos. Papers were scattered all over the floor, and it looked like someone had been trying to destroy evidence. The officers were searching the room, trying to find any clues that might lead them to the perpetrator. As we watched, one of the officers found a piece of paper that had been hidden under the desk. He picked it up and examined it, and then his expression changed. "What is it?" I asked. The officer turned to me and said, "It's a note. And it's addressed to you." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did the note say? And who had written it? The officer handed me the note, and I read it. It was a simple message, just a few words. But it sent a shiver down my spine. "You're getting close," it said. "Back off now, or you'll regret it." I looked up at Jack, and I could see the tension in his eyes. Who had written this note? And what did they want from me? I felt a surge of fear as I read the note. Who was behind this? And what did they want from me? I looked up at Jack, and he could see the fear in my eyes. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll get to the bottom of this. But for now, let's get out of here." We left the principal's office, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. But there was no one. As we walked back to our cars, Jack's phone rang. He answered it, and I could see the tension in his face. "What is it?" I asked. "It's the police chief," he replied. "He wants to see us at the station. Now." I felt a sense of unease. What did the police chief want with us? And why did he want to see us now? We drove to the police station in silence, my mind racing with possibilities. When we arrived, the police chief was waiting for us. He looked stern, and I could see the tension in his eyes. "Gentlemen," he said. "I think we have a problem on our hands." He led us to a conference room, where several officers were waiting. They were all armed, and I could see the seriousness in their faces. "What's going on?" I asked. "We've received a tip," the police chief replied. "A tip that suggests someone is planning to harm you." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was planning to harm me? And why? The police chief handed me a file, and I opened it. Inside, I saw a photo of a man I had never seen before. "Who is this?" I asked. "We don't know," the police chief replied. "But we think he might be the one who's been threatening you." I felt a sense of fear. Who was this man? And what did he want from me? The police chief continued to explain the situation, but I wasn't listening. I was too busy thinking about the man in the photo. Who was he? And what did he want from me? As the meeting came to a close, the police chief handed me a business card. "If you see this man, don't hesitate to call us," he said. "We'll do everything we can to protect you." I took the card, feeling a sense of gratitude. But as I looked at the photo again, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in grave danger. Who was this man? And what did he want from me? I left the police station with Jack, my mind racing with possibilities. We drove back to my house in silence, the tension between us palpable. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw a figure lurking in the shadows. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that it was the man from the photo. He was standing in my driveway, watching me. I felt a surge of fear as I realized that I was in grave danger. Who was this man? And what did he want from me? I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The man didn't move, he just stood there, watching me. I could feel his eyes on me, and it made my skin crawl. Jack noticed my reaction and followed my gaze to the man. "Who is that?" he whispered. I shook my head, unable to speak. The man didn't move, he just stood there, watching us. I could feel the tension building, and I knew that we had to do something. Jack slowly got out of the car, his eyes fixed on the man. "Let's go," he said, his voice low and calm. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. As we approached the man, he didn't move. He just stood there, watching us. I could feel his eyes on me, and it made my skin crawl. "Who are you?" Jack demanded. The man didn't respond, he just kept watching us. I could feel the tension building, and I knew that we had to do something. Jack took a step closer to the man, his eyes fixed on him. I said, "Who are you?" he repeated. The man still didn't respond, he just kept watching us. I could feel the tension building, and I knew that we had to do something. Suddenly, the man turned and ran. He sprinted down the street, his feet pounding the pavement. Jack and I followed him, our hearts pounding in our chests. We ran down the street, following the man as he turned into a nearby alley. As we entered the alley, I heard a noise behind us. I turned to see a car pulling into the alley, its tires screeching as it came to a stop. The man jumped into the car, and it sped away, leaving us standing in the alley. Jack and I looked at each other, our hearts still pounding in our chests. "What just happened?" I asked. Jack shook his head. "I don't know, but I think we just stumbled into something big." I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. What was going on? And who was that man? As we walked back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in grave danger. I looked over my shoulder, expecting to see the man or the car, but there was nothing. We got into the car, and Jack started the engine. "Where are we going?" I asked. Jack looked at me, his eyes serious. "We're going to get to the bottom of this," he said. "We're going to find out who that man is and what he wants." I nodded, my heart still pounding in my chest. I knew that we were in for a wild ride. As we drove away from the alley, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked over my shoulder, but there was nothing. We drove in silence, the tension between us palpable. I knew that we were in grave danger, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. Suddenly, Jack's phone rang. He answered it, and I could see the tension in his face. "What is it?" I asked. Jack looked at me, his eyes serious. "It's the police chief," he said. "He wants to see us again." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. What did the police chief want now? And what was going to happen next? As we arrived at the police station, I could feel the tension building inside me. What did the police chief want to tell us now? And what was going to happen next? We walked into the police chief's office, and he greeted us with a serious expression. "Gentlemen, I have some news," he said. "We've finally cracked the case. We know who's been behind the embezzlement and the threats." I felt a surge of excitement and relief. Finally, we were going to get the answers we had been searching for. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice shaking with anticipation. The police chief hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's Mrs. Johnson, the principal of your son's school." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Mrs. Johnson? The same woman who had been so kind and helpful to my son? It couldn't be. But as the police chief continued to explain, I realized that it was true. Mrs. Johnson had been embezzling funds from the school for years, and she had been using the money to fund her own lavish lifestyle. She had also been threatening me and my son, trying to scare us into keeping quiet about her crimes. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. How could she do this to us? To the school? To the children? The police chief continued to explain that Mrs. Johnson had been arrested and was being charged with multiple counts of embezzlement and harassment. I felt a sense of satisfaction and relief wash over me. Justice had finally been served. But as we left the police station, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. And then I saw her, standing outside the police station. Mrs. Johnson, the principal who had betrayed us all. She looked at me with a mixture of anger and shame, and I felt a surge of emotion. I wanted to confront her, to ask her why she had done this to us. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. I saw my son, standing next to her. He was holding her hand, and he looked up at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "What's going on?" I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My son had no idea what was happening. He had no idea that the woman he trusted, the woman who had been like a mother to him, was a thief and a liar. I took a deep breath and tried to compose myself. I knew that I had to be strong for my son, no matter what. "It's okay, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Johnson has been arrested. She's going to face the consequences of her actions." My son looked up at me, his eyes wide with confusion. "But why?" he asked. "Why did she do this?" I took a deep breath and tried to explain. I told him about the embezzlement, about the threats, about the betrayal. And as I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on his face. He was starting to understand, starting to see the truth. And then, in a moment that I will never forget, my son turned to Mrs. Johnson and said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson. I'm sorry that you did this to us." Mrs. Johnson looked at my son, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," she said, her voice shaking. "I was wrong to do this. I was wrong to hurt you and your family." My son looked up at me, and I could see the forgiveness in his eyes. He was willing to forgive Mrs. Johnson, to give her a second chance. But I knew that I couldn't. I knew that I had to protect my son, to keep him safe from people like Mrs. Johnson. So I took a deep breath and said, "It's okay, sweetie. We'll get through this. We'll be okay." And as we walked away from the police station, I knew that we would be okay. We would heal, we would recover, and we would move on. But Mrs. Johnson would not be so lucky. She would face the consequences of her actions, and she would pay for what she had done to us. As we walked away, I felt a sense of satisfaction and relief wash over me. Justice had finally been served.